Well, good morning, fam, and welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. I'm flying blind and without a net today. It's just a man on a wire, just a man, his camera, his laptop, his lights. And what are we going to talk about today? I want to talk about a little bit about a kind of situation that came up for me this week in terms of the root of this particular show, the program, and what it has become and where it should go and where we are just in general in education activism or advocacy, whatever we want to call it. So the root of this show, the Unpublic show, was for us to be free and have free minds come together and have conversations about education that get to the root of the problem and unearth the root and plant a better tree. And that plant the better tree part is like the part that's most important to me that possibly has been missing from us in doing the show, because there's so much negative stuff to talk about. There's so much problem. There's so much root to pull up when we get into education. It's hard to get to the things that make us feel good about talking about education. And one thing that I've said multiple times is that I'm really interested in the achievement gospels. We talk about students and subgroups, and we disaggregate data by race and class and economics, even geography, where kids live. We take a picture from that. We take a snapshot and we look at that. And then there's a lot of reasons for there to be nihilism, because there are certain subgroups in America and in American education that are always at the bottom, are always so-called behind, or there's a gap between them and the kids that are doing the best, the kids that have the most in terms of advantages in life and privileges in life, and just well situated by God, by zip code and by family and generational wealth. All these other things come into play. That snapshot that we take of the picture of education leads us to have some real essentialist beliefs that I want to challenge constantly. I want to challenge the belief gap, the gap that because those gaps in achievement and outcomes amongst students are so persistent that they almost seem like they're natural. It's like rain. It's like hurricane season. Every year we get the same stats. This is the way the schools performed. And once again, here's the group that did okay or reasonably well. Here's the group that didn't do as well as they did. And here are the groups who did so poorly in comparison to those other two groups that we can predict that their lives are not going to be great, right? And because that happens every year like Groundhog Day, we can get into the cycle of being defeatist. It just is what it is. That's just what's going to happen. That's just the way it's going to be. I've never believed that. As a person who went to public schools, always felt smart, always felt studious, always felt like a great learner, but not a great student in the formal schooling structure, I can tell you that my frame of reference has always been, it's not the kids. It's not their condition. It's not their poverty. It's not their parents. It's not the lack of programs. It's not their community. It's not their culture. It's not them. You could blame a lot of stuff on them for all those things that I just said. But what you are doing when you do that in the process is you are letting the system off the hook for what it's supposed to be doing with its $800 billion a year that it gets to operate schools and education. Now, I've said all this before, so let me say something even new about the moment that we're in, because everything I just said is just kind of a setup to things that I have said previously. I've said that before. We statistically understand that some kids have what feels to be like a permanent kind of caste status level within the education system. Got it. We've said that before. And I've also said before, but that's not the whole story. The whole story is also that there are many places within the system that that's not true. And let me be careful how I say this. Not that anybody has cured the cancer of low achievement within public education completely for the system, but there are many places where the relationship between poverty and student achievement isn't so constant. so correlatory. There are places in schools and entire school systems, for instance, like Success Academy, where the demographic of student that you typically expect to be behind everybody else is outperforming the state that they live in. And that's not an insignificant stat or example, because Success Academy as a school system is like 5 times the size of the average American school district. So you have to ask yourself, why is this? Because, we always want to talk about scale. Let's use some business terms here. Those are great outliers that you're talking about, Chris, but they don't work at scale. I just told you about a school district that is 3 times the size of the average American school district, and their kids from the demographic that normally would underperform are outperforming the state that they live in. So that gets you into the Karen Chenoweth area of education discussion. It's being done. It can be done. All right. So I've said all that before. So what hits me this week? So I do a show a couple of days ago on Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. And I had 2 authors on, Greg and Ryan, who wrote a book called When You Are Wondering, You Are Learning. And in prep for that book, I just kind of fell down the rabbit hole on Mr. Rogers. So I watched old tapes of him. I watched some interviews. I watched some interviews about him, watched some interviews with Greg and Ryan talking about him and the learning science that was behind his work that he did. And then I watched the movie, the biopic. And if you haven't seen it, it's a different movie. Well, I don't know. It's a good movie. I actually think it's a really good movie, but it has some moments in it where you just feel weird. And the weirdness is on you. It's not on him. But I get why there's some cringy moments in the movie. He's so kind of positive and earnest and honest in places where you feel weird because you're not as nearly as earnest as he is. Anyways, I can't say more about the movie. In looking at all that stuff, I thought, wow, so he had a ministry of kindness. His approach to education was to make sure that every child felt completely affirmed, that every child was safe and knew that there was an adult that cared about them, knew that the environment that they were in could be trusted to be stable and affirming and loving, and his whole thing was about kindness, and he was really good at it. He's like really good at the kind part of the education. I see y'all coming through the door too, by the way. Mama Toya, thank you so much for getting the word out to other people. I know I did a terrible job of getting the word out this morning about this, and I hope Elaine and others come through the door. Michelle Johnson, glad to see you there. And Mama Toya, I will keep calling it a ministry, because this education thing that we do has to be more than about fighting and more than about advocacy and just getting policies passed or just the cold numbers or the statistics. Mine is a burning sense. My approach to this work is a calling. There was a point at which in my life, and it's the majority of my life, where I had to do work and jobs just for the money, just to live, just to survive. And there wasn't a single day that I woke up where any of that work was a calling. And there was a point in my life in the late 90s where that came to a head and that ended. And I went into social services. And every day since I made that transition, that was 1999, I think, or 2000, every day since, my work has never felt like work. And I did a range of things. I helped families get housing, helped families with jobs, helped families keep their benefits within the government systems, helped families find schools, and none of that work felt like work. It felt like a ministry, a calling, because my calling is to, getting back to Mr. Rogers, make sure that in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, we don't have a single child that is hungry or undereducated or doesn't feel loved, feels like they're unsafe. How much of a failure are we as adults if we have a single kid in a nation that upgrades to the next iPhone every year, in a nation full of people that have so much largesse, so much abundance and largesse that obesity is a problem in our country, not malnutrition? How is it not a failure that in a country that has that going on, that we would have even a single child that isn't getting a teacher that understands how to teach them, a teacher that's the best prepared in the world with all of the available science on teaching, that is a teacher that is supported and understands her mission or her calling and is well paid and revered by society, and that the classroom is fully stocked and has air conditioning and sunlight, and that the food that they feed the kids during the day is world class, not some crap that has been left over from corporate farms in a deal with the government to like pump our kids with all kinds of GMO hormones to get rid of crappy food that they didn't sell at the market. What kind of world are we when we can't give a kid a school that knows how to teach, that is bright and well stocked, that has air conditioning, good food, decent food, and cultures of learning, cultures of respect, cultures of affirmation, and not just for one group, but for all groups of kids. That would be the Fred Rogers, I think, way and dream. And he didn't do his within schools. His ministry was on television. You might as well consider him a televangelist, because the work that he did on TV, that was really like his ministry. This is how I'm going to get into the homes of kids and say, you're loved, you're worthy, you were born with unsurpassable worth given to you by God. Thing I say all the time. If I really believe that, and just so you know, I do believe these things that I say all the time. If I really believe that every child is born with unsurpassable worth granted them by a mighty, mighty God, which is something that I say a lot, it's kind of a mission statement for me in a way. It's not necessarily a mission statement. It creates a mission statement. That's what I should say. It creates a mission statement because I believe in God, and I believe God is just. And if I believe in justice and real justice, I have to be really afraid of not achieving the justice that I know that God sets out for me. And in a world in which adults run everything, control everything, they control who gets fed and who doesn't, who gets paid and who doesn't, how much rice gets to this kid and how much rice gets to that kid. Do they get beans with the rice or not? Do some kids get like the bowl, the fork, the knife, the bread, the milk, the rice, the beans, and the tablecloth and the table, and some kids sit on the ground with the bowl and the rice barely cooked with a glass of dirty water? You have entire places in the United States. We talked about Flint, for instance, that had a water problem, and that was so bad that the lead was so high in the kids that it couldn't be remediated out of them. There were going to be permanent learning disabilities. By the way, we figured out that was one of many communities across the country that had that particular problem. What's wrong with our world? Is this the Fred Rogers world where we all care about kids so much that when we hear a story like that, we quickly change everything and we fire everybody who knew that that was a problem and let that go on for years and years and years and years? Or do we just say, that was kind of a problem. That was a bad deal. That was a bad deal. Carrie Zealand Johnston, good to see you. Good morning. She says, speak truth in life. I appreciate you in the morning for encouraging me to do exactly that. It's not always easy to be the person who is walking the wire, wanting to say the thing we feel compelled to say, the thing that you think other people won't say. I mean, how often do we even talk about God in these conversations and ministry and the calling that we are supposed to have to do for children versus talking about policy A and policy B and the fights that we have about those things. Aaron Rose, how do you say your last name? Is it DeMuth? Aaron, it's good to see you this morning, however you say your name, but I would love to know how you say it. Aaron Rose, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, DeMuth. I'm going to try it that way. Tanae, good to see you this morning too. The water in Flint still isn't clean. Still, now, till this day. Shameful, shame on you, America. What did I just tell you? I told you that the lead levels was so high in that water that kids who had too much of it could not be remediated, meaning the lead couldn't be remediated, meaning let me not use fancy words. You couldn't treat it. meaning they were going to have permanent learning disabilities. So learning disabilities in that community went through the roof. And oh, by the way, isn't it weird that those same learning disabilities were seen in Watts in Los Angeles and in other parts of the country too? And it was known, and we're blaming kids. We're blaming kids for their outcomes in schools. Do kids run the water system? Do kids poison their own water? Do poor single moms, because we love to beat up on single moms as their problem, do single moms poison the water, affecting entire communities of kids? I don't think so. Thomas Anderson, good morning. Okay, Aaron, I don't know if this helps. You say, "Da move." So, okay, I'm hoping I'm getting that right. Thomas Anderson, good to see you this morning. Thomas says, and kids in Michigan have, what do you say here? And kids in Michigan have no right to be taught how to read. There was a law or a constitutional amendment, I think it was, in Michigan that was meant to ensure that you had a constitutional right to literacy, specifically in Michigan. I thought that. I could be wrong, Thomas. You should look it up and let me know. But I thought it passed. We have a constitutional amendment in Minnesota that we're trying to pass right now that would change a few words in our Constitution that would not just guarantee a kid to a uniform education, but to a high quality education, specifically aimed at results rather than just access to something that's uniform that everybody gets. And it's really wild. It's really weird. The group of people that are fighting that, have their own lawsuit around integration. So they don't want the constitutional amendment to pass because they fear that if the state were on the hook for a high quality education, this is wild. This is how institutional people think. They believe that would lead to a constitutional right to a remedy if they're not getting a high quality education. And one of those remedies that they fear the most is the remedy of getting educational services outside of the traditional system. So they are so obsessive about defending the traditional system that they are willing to fight a constitutional amendment specifying a right to a high quality education. That's the America that we live in. Aaron Rose says, it's the infiltration system. I thought the plumbing union was on top of it. And I believe you are talking about Detroit, and I am not sure. I'm sorry, not Detroit, Flint, Michigan. And I don't know enough to know. Oh, okay. So it's D-Muth. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate you for the correction on your name. And yet they still have purpose and God can use them. Good call out. Actually, let me get back to my point, because thank you, Carrie. That's a good place to go back to. How you view your enemies, how you view the people that you see as behind you or between you and justice, between you and where you want to be. My call out this week in studying for the show on Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, was that I was taken aback. It kicked the wind out of me a little bit about how kind he was and how successful he was with kindness. And in Christianity, listen, anybody listening or watching this or whatnot, please take this within the scope of if you are Jewish or Muslim or Christian or none of the above or whatnot, whatever your thought system is, there's probably a similar analogy or equation to what I'm saying. I'm only telling you through kind of my faith. And within the Christian faith, you have all of this talk within the Bible, for instance, around the fruit of the Spirit being things like joy and and patience and kindness, and all this stuff is really the fruit of the tree of your faith. Like if you are being faithful and people can see it, they will see the fruit of you're being able to sow peace and bring people together, and a gentleness of spirit. And then in Corinthians, the thing you've all heard in weddings before, there's this lot of talk around like love is not love is kind, love is not jealous, love is not like envious and all these negative things. It enumerates all the things that love is. And they're all good things. They're all like patience and kindness and being slow to anger and all those things. And then you get to the parts of the Bible when you see like when Jesus gets angry about injustice, like overturning the money tables in the temple and kicking the money people out of the temple, to me is an example of it's another expression of love for justice. So the whole kind of Corinthians, love is portion of the Bible, and all of the fruit of the Spirit of the Bible is solid. It's set. Love your enemy, figure out your differences on the way to court. Don't need a judge. You don't need a judge to help you figure it out. Wherever there's two or more of you together, so there is God. All of those things are telling you how to be with each other. But there is a moment in which you look around and you see the money tables, and you want to toss things over. And in education and in my life, I see more of those money table type things, times where justice is so not prevalent for us that it almost induces anger. So anyways, watching all the Fred Rogers stuff and being done with it at the end, I thought, man, I can be mean sometimes. I literally can take people on when I believe that injustice is involved, when I believe that our kids are being shorted, our families are being shorted, poor people, the least of these. The Bible also talks a lot about the last will be first and the first shall be last. So taking on the first constantly on behalf of the last, to me, seems like a calling. It seems like what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to join the first constantly and beat up on the last. We're not supposed to punch down. We're supposed to constantly punch up on behalf of the people that need it the most. And I can't imagine in America a bigger problem than the poor not getting the educational skills and life skills they need in their youth while they're young to be able to defend themselves economically, politically, socially, intellectually when they become adults. Carries back Micah 6:8, act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. That's my t-shirt. It's not a t-shirt. It's a t-shirt that I wear inside out. How about that? It's on my t-shirt, but it's inside out because, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, is you don't see it as my driver. You see my behavior, which is not very Fred Rogers like when I encounter people that I think are really the problem. You're the problem. You're the problem. The other thing that happened too was like after studying for Mr. Rogers, the last 3 days, I've lifted this book up. I talked to, I think 2 days ago, I talked to Dr. Maisha Taylor and her husband, William Taylor, or William Schlitz, I'm sorry. And I had met their kids previously, so two of them at least, Haley and Ian. And Haley, they pulled her out of traditional public schools because they were hearing things they didn't like from the teachers. They were seeing behavior situations that they didn't love with their kids, and they decided to homeschool. Haley is 16 and in law school. Ian, I believe, is 15 and has graduated. I think he has an MBA and he's a CEO. And their younger sister is 13, and I believe that she's in college. So remember all that stuff when I started earlier about the disaggregation of the data by race tells the whole story for some people. So I just told you about 3 kids who are in their teens and they're in advanced education now, in advanced college education, higher level college education. And their mom actually grew up in, Dr. Maisha Taylor grew up in South Central Los Angeles. So did their dad. Their mom's dad, their grandfather, was the second person shot in the riots in the early 90s. She obviously didn't grow up with a silver spoon in her mouth. She went through the same schools that we lie about kids all the time and say, this is, it's the kids, it's not the schools. She grows up, she does well, she has children, she pulls them out of schools that she doesn't think are cutting it. And I just told you what the outcome of that is. It was interesting because I asked her the question, a lot of people are going to hear this story and they're going to think, oh, she's just, those kids are just prodigies. Some kids are just actually like super special and gifted in that way. And she reminded me, she said, yeah, what's interesting is we have 3 kids. 2 of them are biological kids. And she said, you can use that as an excuse. You could try and put that on them as an excuse that they're just somehow naturally gifted and it wasn't anything that we did in terms of educating them in education, controlling their education. But their third daughter is adopted from Somalia. She had delays, what they thought would be learning delays, and didn't have the pristine start in life that many American kids have. And I just told you she's 13 years old in college. She could have been like any of the African kids, for instance, in my school system, who are not thriving in the school system. And my community constantly blames them when they don't do well. It's on them. It's their culture. It's their background. It's their not understanding the American way. It's whatever. But what I just told you is a story that could be done. Carrie says that she has a meeting. She has to go. It's good to see you this morning. And thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you. Have a good morning. Cynthia Rose says, I call my teaching role not merely a job. And she puts hearts behind it. So I am glad that you feel that great about it. Elaine, your substance lies in what you do, not what you say you'll do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Aaron likes the idea of punching up, and sees that as a good word. Shell Johnson, speak, Chris. Well, I am trying. I am trying, ma'am. I did have a couple of things to show you that go along with this story. I am walking this somewhere, just so you guys know. Will you stick with me if I show you a video that I think is kind of powerful? It was shown to me. Actually, wait. Let me do this before I do that. I'm going to show you the type of tweet interactions that I have, and this is why this is becoming kind of important for me. So this is partially my life right now. So this is a tweet from Erica Sanzi, who I've known for years and have worked with. We are currently not seeing eye to eye on education policy, but it is what it is. I mean, we've known each other for probably 5 years, maybe 6 years, and she's in a different ministry now. Like we've had common cause and ministry together, I think, for years, and right now we just have different ministries. But this isn't about her. It's really about this tweet around, she's lifting up. There was a summer reading program or page in Massachusetts, and it's this. I'll lift up the tweet. This is all books that promote activism in students, so in young people. And, these books kind of range from how not to be racist to things around Pride Month and dealing with other marginalized populations. And I think, this tweet that she has about this is kind of begging the question, hey, should this send up red flags for parents? What do you think? And, Zachary Wright, who is somebody who I've known for years now, and he writes for my organization, have lots of respect for him, just says, this isn't the most Fred Rogers response. He says, my thoughts are, if you thought that this was supporting white boys, you'd be totally okay with it. And that sets off an unfortunate chain, an unfortunate thread. But this guy jumps in. Thomas Birchfield jumps in. And he basically says to Zach, this is, let me pull up and read it. Eye roll. This is a perfect example of the racist ideology infecting our schools right now. It's not a school's job to assign books that support a certain race. Your belief only makes sense if you believe blacks are inferior and need extra support in the form of activist books. I don't really want to go too far down how stupid this actually is, but see, even that isn't a Fred Rogers response. See, this is a money changer's response. The injustice done to black and brown and beige and indigenous people for centuries in this country has not faced a reckoning. There has not been a truth and reconciliation. There has not been a process of recompensation or reparation. So we are still living in the breach of an age-old racial divide. It's like a math problem that remains unsolved. It's like a math problem on a page with an equal sign. And after the equal sign, there's nothing. There's nothing, just a white space, just whiteness, a white space next to the equal sign. So as long as that math problem, that breach, that thing that remains unrepaired, that situation that took place that has not been fixed, that wound, that gaping wound, as long as that remains unsolved, unresolved, unreconciled, we will have these threads and these tweets and these bubble ups all over the country. We will have the taking of a video that hits the evening news that results in Target getting burned down. And you will blame the torchbearers, the people who burn Target down. You will blame the people who shout too loud, the people who march too hard, the people who stomp as if they care about justice. You will blame them, and you still will never solve that problem, and you will never win. You will never win. Infections don't die because you ignore them. Cancers don't die because you ignore them. That is not the way that you solve problems. It's not the way that thinking people solve problems. Thomas eventually just says to Zach, "You're everything," here it is, "you're everything that's wrong with our schools today." A teacher like Zach, a Jewish male teacher like Zach, who teaches kids of color and indigenous children in a state and in a city that has a very poor record with those same kids, a white male Jew teacher who thinks deeply about these issues, educates himself to a high level on them, and attempts with compassion and with caring and with love to fix the breach, to stand in the breach. He's what's wrong with everything that he's what's wrong with everything in our public schools. So I just respond to that with a very Fred Rogers-like, unlike Fred Rogers, if irony were a tweet. When a person like Thomas Birchfield says to Zach, "You're everything that's wrong with our schools today," rather than dealing with the inherent white supremacy of the initial tweet here and the anti-justice kind of initial tweet, he makes it about the helper. Fred Rogers told us, look for the helpers. In bad times, look for the helpers. We're in a bad time. Zach Wright is a teacher and he's a helper. And Thomas Birchfield is attacking the helper. So I look up Thomas Birchfield, and I find out as a teacher, and this is don't direct any hate towards Thomas, but this is just the way that my mind works when I look at these things. Look him up because he's a teacher himself, and he's saying towards the end, when I call out some logical inconsistencies in his point, he says, "Fine, whatever. I've witnessed the inner workings of today's public schools with my own eyes, so your logical flags didn't really matter. Teaching is 100% without activism. It's literally not in the job description. Be an activist on your own time. Don't bring it into school curriculum." Which means he's very clearly on the anti-CRT side. The schools should just be white normed and the way that they've always been, and that all of this kind of radical insurgency of new educators and teachers coming into education is the problem. That's the real problem. And that's what we're being told now. We're being told by this kind of white rights movement that we're the problem for attempting to fix a long-term problem that we have had that does real and actual damage to human beings, not to Black people or brown people or indigenous people or people from the LGBTQ community, but to God's children, to people, right? So if I were to tell you, hey, it's Thursday morning, I want to talk to you about something that is hurting people. Do you care? And you were to say, well, tell me more and I'll tell you whether I care. That's a different response than, of course I do. If somebody is hurting anywhere and they're hurting from something that is real and manifest and can be seen and can be touched and can be studied, let's dig in. That's a different response. Because see, now you're connected to humanity and that's what you care about. But we have right now is a misanthropic movement that is based upon hoarding and maintaining of old privileges and the complete denial that there's anything wrong in the world, that is hurting entire human populations. So he is a teacher in Jefferson County schools in Kentucky. Jefferson County schools in Kentucky have long been heralded for their integration programs over many years, but in more recent times, there have been lots of really big exposés on that district, telling you the number of racial kind of problems that they have in their school system. Everything from an achievement gap to having closed Black schools on purpose to push kids out of their neighborhoods and push them into white schools. And then when they got there, they didn't actually do any better. They actually lost their schools, their teachers, their communities, their investment within their own system of education, and they lost achievement. So he's in this county of schools, but Zach Wright is the real problem in his mind. The real problem is that we even want to call this thing a thing. We want to talk about Black students and the experience that they're having in the school system, rather than just pretending there's no such thing as a Black child and allowing white children to have advantages within your system and having others have disadvantages or whatnot. The real problem are the people who overturn the table, who flip the table over, flip the coins over. In Jefferson County, there's this program right now called the Black Math Genius Program. And it's so funny to me because even this program, a program aimed at boosting the achievement of Black students, the district has data on Black students that says Black students in math could be doing better. How can we make them do better? How can we help them do better and support them to do that? Well, let's form a program to make that happen. Even the Black Math Genius Program becomes an issue. They're postponing it now. They just had a school board meeting where parents showed up and expressed multiple problems that they had with the program or whatnot. But it's the annoying and repetitive inability to just do something positive for a portion of kids that literally have had an ancestry of misery within this country. You just can't even, you can barely talk about it anymore without somebody getting, oh, well, there you go again, and getting unnerved about it and getting kind of animated and angry and misanthropic. It's the best word. You hate humanity. You hate God's children. You hate justice so much. You hate justice and God's children so bad that you don't even want to hear when they're hurting. You just want to blame and accuse and be angry and hostile. And you want to shoot guns at the ambulances that come to help the kids and aid them rather than jumping in and saying, how can I help? Because that's who you are. Don't get me started this morning, you guys. Like I'm feeling all kinds of feelings and thoughts. Can you imagine like hair discrimination even being a thing? When I'm telling you about the experience that Black people and brown people have of not being normalized into the country that they live in, your hairstyle as a person of color can be the cause for you being kicked out of school, prevented from graduating, prevented from walking across the stage. Your hair, your natural hair, the way that it grows out of your head for one race of people can be cause for punishment. And for another group of people, do you hear how stupid I'm sounding as this is coming out of my mouth? Your hair, the way that God made it grow out of your head, for one group of people can be reason for punishment. How dare you have big, thick, beautiful, curly hair? And at the same time, if it grows straight and stringy, it's not cause for punishment. Make it make sense. Please help me. Help me. I need your guys' help. Let me see if there's any other comments who's going to help me out here. All right, I don't see any guys helping me yet. Come for me. Help me out here. Make that make sense. I don't get it. Whew. Schools bar Native American students from wearing traditional regalia at graduation. Can you imagine what it's like to know the stories about how, first of all, your people were decimated, possibly by about 2/3 of them wiped out through a purposeful campaign of genocide by European Americans in the country that you live in. And the victors of those genocides took much of your culture and the look of it or whatnot and made it part of the American ethos, the same way that they put like Dr. King on a stamp. They kill you, they murder you, they bury you, and then they put you on a stamp and regale in your afterlife and make you part of their topology. So then you have a football team or sports teams that are like the Braves and the Redskins and the Chiefs. That's kind of like your social museum of the people that you've killed. And then the survivors, because we're all survivors. The survivors of that genocide actually still have to fight for their own kind of relevance, their authenticity, their right to be who they want to be. Schools bar Native students from wearing traditional regalia at graduation. How thoroughly, thoroughly stupid. It cuts from left to right. I can't get rid of this bar here. I don't know why. Let's pull this down. Oh, I don't know what it is. There's a story here that's hidden beneath this bar that basically says that Black parents in New York have had enough of kind of the failed kind of experience that they're having in the public schools there. And this one quote here caught my eye and caught my attention. These are the type of stats that you see and you think, well, that needs correction. District-wide, just 28% of Black students in grades 3 through 8 passed their 2019 state math exams, and just 37% passed English. At some schools, almost no one passed. A whopping 94% of fifth graders at PS 134 in Hollis, for example, flunked math. 83% bombed English. You have a school where people are well paid, and 94% fail in math and 83% in English. And you know what that means in terms of predictability, what happens to you when these numbers are like this. I get that everybody's going to, want to jump on the train of, well, tests don't tell us everything, and they don't tell us all there is to know. What I just read to you tells me something. I don't know if I can't help you if it doesn't tell you anything. Yes, there's other things you could be measuring. Absolutely. Go ahead, measure those other things. These two numbers still tell me something. They tell me something really big. And what people want you to do is whitewash those numbers. They want you to go off on an errand of like, well, there's all kinds of other things we could be measuring. Are they making any growth? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? Keep asking all those questions. These two numbers still tell me something. I'm not stupid. Right? I may not have been a good student, but I was an excellent learner. And I do know that these two numbers do tell me something. Some of you are going to say, well, it's about money. There's this other quote here, and I tweeted it out this morning. You can see it right here. Money's not the problem. Money kind of always is some part of the problem. But anyways, it says money's not the problem. PS 134 spent $27,000 per student in 2019, much more than double the national average. New York spends the most per pupil in the country. Catholic schools and small private schools in the area spend far less with far better results. I don't know if that's the most entirely fair statement or claim, but it should tell you something. It's $27,000 that we're paying. We're investing $27K. You have to ask yourself, who's getting that $27K? Where's that? Who's got it? Like, is the kid getting $27K worth of value in the classroom, or is some other set of people like collecting those coins before they hit the kid? How much of that is in pensions? God, I just want to know, and acquiring people want to know. We are seeing a national movement where parents are starting to show up in schools or school boards and scream crazy and insane things at school boards nationally. And most of those things that they're screaming about, underneath them, they have an underpinning of injustice. They are calling for wildly, I think, inequitable kind of things. Number one, let's just be clear. I've said it here a million times. You've heard it. You're listening to it. You're watching the same news I'm watching. There's a national movement to ban so-called critical race theory. Ban, that's in air quotes, critical race theory in air quotes, in schools, in air quotes. Because none of those things actually really exist. All of those things are a myth. You're not going to ban an entire thought system. Teachers are still going to wake up tomorrow and teach damn near whatever they want to teach in their classrooms. Some are going to get in trouble. Many are going to get in trouble, possibly. My fear is that some will stop teaching what they should teach because they fear these things, but maybe some of those were already looking for an out anyways. What I don't fear is there's going to be people who just don't give a damn and they're going to teach the right thing no matter what anyways. But the ban is false. It's theater. The critical race theory, no one was teaching that in schools anyways. And the people who have popularized this as an issue were very clear that they knew that it wasn't about critical race theory. They knew that they hated diversity programs. They hated inclusion programs. They hated things like the Math Genius, the Black Math Genius Project. They hated things that didn't include white children in themselves. So the critical race theory, air quotes, because even the people that popularize this as an issue know, excuse me, that they're abusing the ignorance of the public and they're abusing the trust of the public for political gain and effect. And I'm pulling up something here that you see on the screen about the Dunning-Kruger effect, specifically to say that there is this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Look at this picture right here. Look at this guy right here. He's like oblivious. He's like, he's talking very authoritatively like Thomas, the teacher, on my Twitter feed. And he's got all this stuff around him. He couldn't be more kind of imperial and unaware of the gaps in his knowledge. And one guy here is getting mad, like, oh my God, I can't believe what you're saying. The Black woman is like, Lord Jesus, just stop me from like having to deal with this type of thing anymore. This has been 400 years of this nonsense. I'm just like not trying to have it. This woman right here who's probably with him is like, my God, does he always have to do this at every party? Do we have to go into some MAGA nonsense or whatnot? And this is probably a young person in their life who's like, oh, here we go again, Dad, just knock it off, blah, blah, blah. That's my kind of reading of the picture. You can read what you want into it. But let me tell you what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, because it tells you right here. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a type of cognitive bias in which people believe that they are smarter and more capable than they really are. Essentially, low ability people do not possess the skills needed to recognize their own incompetence. The combination of poor self-awareness and low cognitive ability leads them to overestimate their own capabilities. I can't even get through it without laughing because I can't think of a more perfect analysis of the Thomases of the world and all the people that he represents, and these new organizations that are popping up to take advantage of the Dunning-Kruger effect for political gain in the run-up to the 2022 elections. It couldn't be more clear that this is what we're fighting. We are not fighting a fair and honest debate about diversity and inclusion and anti-racism in schools and what we should be teaching our kids. We are fighting the Dunning-Kruger movement, the DKM. I just coined that. So everybody, let's just share that. Put it on a t-shirt. The DKM is the most dangerous cancer in the United States right now of everything. You can fight about everything else if you want, but thinking people are losing their country. Thinking people who have a heart for justice and for sincerity and for honesty and for humanity, they are really losing their country right now, because the Tucker Carlson nation is one that is built entirely on hatred for humanity. He says things very clearly like diversity is not our strength. It does not make us better. It makes us dirtier. It makes our streets dirtier or whatnot. Listen to what is being said about human beings all day, all night long. It became popular to talk about people like Maxine and Waters and others as low IQ people, and to say that entire groups of Americans come from shithole countries, and to say that people who are trying to cross a border to prosperity to work their ass off in jobs that you yourself never would work are not sending us their best people. They're sending us their rapers, their rapists, they're rapists and their gang members and whatnot. Totally immune to the facts, but completely committed to an evil, misanthropic viewpoint on history and on people, on the American people. The scholar strategy: how critical race theory alarms could convert racial anxiety into political energy. Headline. So remember what I just told you. Dunning-Kruger effect can be converted into political energy for 2022. And the way to get people is to have this guy. This guy is the chief constituent of the Dunning-Kruger movement. He's holding a sign that says critical race theory is poison. I don't want to go into a deep dive of what critical race theory is, but just look at it this way. Our systems produce unequal results. And in some cases, it's more alarming than in other cases. And the way that you know that is because you look at information and data, and then you test that information and data by something so simple as, for instance, here's an example. You send out 2 sets of people to consume a system the same way and give them the exact same background and see what type of results they bring back when they are demographically different, but they are theoretically the same, meaning you have the same credit score, you have the same type of job, you have the same kind of social background, and we send you to Texas and say, go out and try and apply for 100 apartments and let's see what happens. So the white family comes back and they're audit testers, they go into the market, and the black family comes back and you look at the data and the information. And the data and the information tells you that in a good percentage of the cases, the black person couldn't even be shown the apartment until they did some other additional hoops or things, even though they have the exact same kind of, background. But the white family was shown like 8 or 10 apartments by the same agent who really just wanted to workshop them to death. One set of families gets steered towards some lower premium or lower tiered apartments, and another set get kind of shown the world, like the premium apartments that have a great value. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? In a nutshell, that's a critical race theory problem. When you ask the question, why is that? Why is the same system producing unequal results? This guy right here, Mr. Dunning-Kruger, is telling you even asking those questions is poison. That's poisonous. How dare you? You know why? Because Mr. Dunning-Kruger is an investor and stakeholder in the current system staying the way that it is. So asking those questions is clearly poison to him. Absolutely. Don't you think? Wouldn't it be poison to you if it was going to threaten the standing that you have right now? Can convert the Dunning-Kruger stuff into political energy to win. Here's another headline: how white supremacy weaponizes ignorance. I don't want to go any further. I just told you how white supremacy is weaponizing ignorance. And you hear the voice of that ignorance in this headline. Education, not indoctrination. Stop critical race theory. Stop finding, pointing out, and thinking critically about why systems are having unequal results. Just stick with blaming the people and the individuals for it without asking the question, why do 2 equally qualified or unqualified people before a court or before a housing market or before a justice system or before a police department, the exact 2 different, the exact same people in terms of background, like offense or credit or whatever, but different in race, why are they having wildly different kind of outcomes? Same situation, but different outcomes. Same crime, longer sentence, right? Same credit score, different interest rate that they have to pay, right? Same job, but the agent is animated to show one, all the houses, and animated to show the other one, very few, with a bad loan, by the way. Just asking the question has created this moral panic in people that are deeply invested in stopping the browning of America because they will feel displaced by it. That's the problem that I think we're having right now. Anyways, we're getting close to the hour, and I just want to say, maybe I should tell you some things that give me more hope. So let me just run through a couple of them really briefly. So the first one is a quick clip. Listen to what she says in the beginning.
But I really think homeschooling people of color in America is the beginning of a huge solution. It will change so much. It changes who you are as an adult and how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you move in it. And I'm so excited for this to be fast growing aspect of American culture right now. My name is Samantha. I am one of 6 founders of an African-centered vegan homeschool in the Flatbush community of Brooklyn, New York. And there were many reasons why we came together as parents to form this for our children. One is the surrounding public schools are just above atrocious in my estimation. Most of the surrounding public schools have lost their arts, they've lost their music, they've lost dance, even gym sometimes. My husband actually teaches in some of these schools that have lost the arts, and the stories he's come back home with definitely solidified our decision to homeschool. But we didn't want them to be homeschooled alone. We didn't want to.
So on this case, I saw this a while back and I thought, oh my God, like an Afro-vegan homeschool collaborative amongst educators and parents that wanted to save their kids from the local schools. That's a positive sign. There doesn't require any fighting, doesn't require us to all agree on anything. It's an affirmative step in the right direction. It's an attempt to reclaim our kids and put them into an environment. If you go and watch the rest of this video, and I'll make sure that I make all of these links available to people. If you go back and you watch the rest of it, the kids like grow food. This is in New York, right? The kids grow food, they eat their food, they're in a peaceful community. The parents are helping to create a very kind of like, outdoorsy, hands-on type of school and opportunity for the kids. It's built on love, and it doesn't have all this kind of like angry, hostile, vituperative stuff that I was just, that I've been railing on during this show for the last few minutes. Here's another quick one.
To get them 4 years out of high school, but Emanuela Antoine, a high school senior in Durham, was motivated to get it much faster than that.
I decided, you know what? I want to be at the top of my class. And the only way for me to move up in the ranks was to take higher level courses.
So back in 2019, when she was a sophomore, she started taking classes at Durham Tech through a partnership with her school, New Tech High at Hillside.
My entire family background is really based upon trying your hardest and being the absolute best that you can be.
So she set her sights on being the first high school student to earn both a 2-year associate's degree and an internet technology certificate before getting a high school diploma, while still doing community service work and extracurricular activities.
I told her at that time, Emanuela, this is going to be a difficult task.
Durham Tech advisor Jillian Davis says Emanuela's response floored her.
I remember it just like it was yesterday. I am willing to do whatever it takes. And with that statement alone, I was like, okay, this is the girl. So we're going to make this happen.
And although Emanuela did achieve that goal and earn straight A's along the way, it turned out to be harder than even her advisor had imagined. That's because a year into it, the pandemic struck and delays threw off scheduling.
I did not get a lot of sleep, less than 5 hours on average, definitely.
Emanuela says that's why she's dedicating her summer to getting good sleep before she enrolls at UNC in the fall in order to get her psychology degree in 2023. And then what else? More education.
I will be 19 when I first start med school.
I am so proud of the work that she has done and her accomplishments. And I know she's going to do amazing things going forward.
Although humble about her accomplishments and being a role model, Emanuela is proud of her efforts and has advice for other young people who may follow in her footsteps.
As long as you have the people around you to help you stay strong and you have that initial core belief that you yourself can do it, it will happen.
She plans to become a psychiatrist specializing in eating disorders, and a career helping others would be a surprise.
She says, I will be 19 starting med school. These are the type of stories that keep me like alive and going. I'll just keep jumping through. My media feed is hit with these. This is a Virginia student accepted in Juilliard who the community rallied around him and made sure that he had what he needs. You're seeing more and more of these stories pop up right now, as they do every year, of like the Black students that have been accepted to many or multiple colleges, even though they've beat lots of odds to get there. Those to me are the stories where Fred Rogers lives, where we know that it can be done, we don't blame kids, that we can help them get to where they need to get. I see stories like this. Mom of 7 makes history as the first Black person ever to earn a PhD in survey methodology. On one hand, you can say, like, I can't believe that we're still having firsts. But on the other hand, you see things like mom of 7 makes history by becoming the first PhD in a rigorous field. And you have to applaud. These are the type of things. This is the achievement gospel that I feel is so missing from my palate, so missing from. And the Fred Rogers this week was a palate cleanser in that there's so much dirty muck in education advocacy, and the discussion is so tilted and skewed towards the anger and hostility of the Dunning-Kruger movement that we have to get back on track and see things for what they are, good things. Saw this pop up. Pharrell Williams is set to open a private school for low-income students in low-income families in Virginia. Seeing creative people in a creative field who are putting their money into understanding, I was a creative person who didn't necessarily do well in traditional schools. I have resources. I'm going to start something that opens up pathways and opportunities. This is the opposite of the misanthropic Dunning-Kruger movement. This is the fruit of the spirit movement. This is we will produce things that give life to people, that give life to things. We won't kill things. We won't hate, and we won't show up at meetings to say what we're against. And we won't just like look for every possible kind of wedge and to drive the wedge and the gap further. You know, you have entire groups now, to be very honest with you, parent groups in some cases, that in 100% of their agenda is to drive wedges between people for political gain, wedges between Jews and teachers, wedges between white parents and everybody else, wedges between marginalized students and the students that they want to maintain privilege and hoard opportunity. Entire agendas based upon the negative, punching down. And what we have to do is we have to punch up constantly. We have to be, because we have to be mightier for the poor and for the widows and the orphans and the underprivileged or whatnot. We have to be mighty warriors for them, because we understand that the warriors of privilege are actually strong, well-resourced, well-organized. They have Facebook groups. They have full-time dedicated employees online and in think tanks that are looking to make sure that the Dunning-Kruger effect translates into permanent privilege for a group of people that have been so privilege dependent for so long that any attempt that questions it is seen as a great and major threat. I look at LeBron James, I Promise School. We've talked about this before. You know, he's got money, he's got resources. He wants to help. He doesn't want to just help the students. He doesn't want to just help their education. He just wants to help a community and lift them up. His school provides many additional resources for kids, but also for the parents, job assistance, job help, or whatnot. This is what happens when you love people. This is what happens when you have love for people. You don't blame the poor. You don't scour at the poor. You don't show the type of, attitude to the poor that the Pharisees had with people that they thought were rule breakers. If you don't have a Jesus-like clarity about the poor being the ones that need you to punch up for them, then there's something wrong with your ministry. Again, anybody who is listening to this in the beginning heard me say, when I say things like God and Jesus and ministry or whatnot, I am talking in my language. Please let your ears translate that into whatever you believe in life, whatever good system of thinking you have, whatever it is. Wilson and Ciara fund charter school in Seattle. Again, let's produce something. Let's build something. Let's not just tear things down. Let's produce, let's build. I'm going to leave you guys with the video if you will watch it, if you will stick around. But this has been another episode of Unpublic. I'm happy to see you all every morning. Thank you so much for giving me your brunch time in between breakfast and lunch. I don't know what time this is for you, wherever you are, but you're amazing for doing it. You really are, because I'm always amazed when people care, number one, about something so unsexy as education. I'm even more kind of just like turned on by the idea that not only do you care about education, you really are motivated enough to consume ideas and thoughts about it and share them and exchange them and build community around the idea that we can actually be doing so much better for our kids. Cynthia Rose, thank you this morning. Michelle Johnson, thank you. Andrea, thank you so much. Is it Manly or Mainly? I think it's Manly. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Thomas Anderson, William Conrad, Joshua Stewart, who I happen to know, Tanae Hamilton, Peter. Peter, you're gonna have to help me with your last name. Everybody knows me on this show, knows that I have a problem with names, but I'm happy that you are here this morning, Peter. It is not your problem, it's my problem. And Carrie had to leave, but I thank you all so much for joining me this morning. I'm gonna go ahead and play this video for you at the end, and we will see you again tomorrow with an episode of Freedom Friday. Okay, let me find the video if I can. Oh, video, where'd you go? I don't know. Well, I think I may have lost my video. No, I didn't. Here it is. Okay, guys, you ready? Here you go.
We survived the fires of Selma and Nagasaki, and we will survive Palestine. We survived Vietnam and Rwanda and Mississippi. The 50 stripes around our stars, 50 years to life behind their bars. We survived middle school and self-inflicted scars, losing our mothers to our fathers' hands. We survived slavery, genocide, came back from the dead and spread like wildfire. Miracle, we will survive. Stonewall and Soweto, the embargo, the ghetto, police beatings, the screams and the echoes, the cutbacks, the evictions, the droughts and the prisons, Jim Crow and gas chambers, warfare and lynching. The seeds from our strange fruit been sprinkled across this terrain by our angels. And everywhere we land, we're gonna take root. And every inch of rock, mud, and sand, we're gonna break through. You're here right now. I'm seeing you with my own two eyes. Think of all the demons that tried to take you, and you still survive. And we will survive. Miracle, we will survive. We will survive. To destroy us, they'll have to annihilate our angels. We summon the strength of all those who came before us and all those coming. We must win freedom in our fingers when the world gives us nothing but believing a new day is coming. In my soul, I know we will. Everything's gonna be alright. Are rooting for us. We will survive. We will survive. Oh, yeah. miracle. We will survive. The new days coming. Everything's gonna be alright. We will survive. Our ancestors.
I just think that that is totally beautiful. If you are looking for it, you'll find, Climbing Poetry. You will find them at Climbing Poetry. You can see .com. Totally beautiful set of artists that were shared with me yesterday by a group of grassroots education activists. And I just thought it was amazing and wanted to share it with you today at the end. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again tomorrow for an episode of Freedom Friday.